regime. The world community wants to keep the Iran nuclear deal. Our allies are the Germans, the French, the British. They want to keep in this deal. The world community wants to keep the deal. Let's talk about normal countries. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia. Is that who our allies are? They are the biggest threat
people to hear
to the world community. And let's talk. You're hurting me. You're actually hurting me.
Well, you're falling off.
I want to ask. Do you think these sanctions are hurting the regime or they're hurting the Iranian people? They're hurting the Iranian people. You are making a case for war with Iran. How did the war with Iraq turn out? You're doing exactly the same thing we did in the case of Iraq. We don't want another war in the Middle East. Let's
you want to
see.
go outside and give
How
a
does
speech?
Iraq turn
You can
out?
do that.
How did
You want to go
Libya
outside
turn
and give a
out?
speech? You can do
We
that.
have the people of
You can
Syria
take time.
suffering. And how dare you bring up the issue of Yemen? It's the Saudi bombing that is killing most people in Yemen. So let's get real. No more war. Peace with Iran.
I think she had her coffee this morning.
Well, joining me now to go through some of the week's top stories is the co-founder of grassroots anti-war NGO Code Pink, Medea Benjamin. Medea, thanks so much for joining us in the studio. Let's go straight to the Barclay Brothers Telegraph, which is related to Wire in London. NATO summit, Donald Trump says, we would be in World War III if it wasn't for me. Why are you protesting this week's today's
Well,
NATO
first
summit?
let me take off on this, because he was saying it referring to North Korea, which he really pushed that crisis by going into that whole fire and fury issue. You know, he is Mr. World War III. If there's going to be a World War III, actually, it would be around Iran, where he is creating this incredible conflict, totally manufactured by Donald Trump. We're here because we think that NATO should have been disbanded when the Soviet Union fell apart, that there's no need for this military alliance, that it just sucks up a lot of money that goes to weapons manufacturers. And we know, like here in the UK, there are campaigns saying, no, we don't want to do that. We want our money to go to things like healthcare, education, Green New Deal. Who are we fighting against? He wants to fight against...
Well, as you know, Jens Stoltenberg says it's China and Russia.
Russia. I don't think the people of the European Union or anybody in Europe really wants to go to war with China or Russia.
Okay,
So,
well...
time to end the anachronistic NATO.
Well, there will be less at the NATO summit about this next story from the Mail Online. Disturbing images of malnourished baby boy in Yemeni hospital reveal devastating cost of conflict, which has driven millions to the brink of famine. Not so much about this world's worst humanitarian crisis.
No,
I should just say that we're in an election campaign. Restrictions here. Corbyn, the Greens, SNP, Plaid, and the Lib Dems are against arms sales to Saudi Arabia, and the Tories appear to be for it.
Well, let's just say that it's the UK, it's the US, it's the French, it's the wonderful liberal Western democracies that have been supplying the Saudis with these bombs that have been destroying Yemen. And, you know, you look at a picture like that and your heart goes out and you think, you know, what are we doing?
We're giving aid to help that child.
We're
That's what the
bombing
European
infrastructure that is destroying the possibility of these people to get access to food and the medicines they need. If they survive, they are stunted for life. Their brains are affected by malnutrition. So this is decades that it will take, to say nothing of all the money that it will cost to rebuild Yemen. But the way to stop this immediately is to stop the weapons sales, stop the support to the Saudis.
Well, NATO governments deny bombing themselves. In fact, they just say they have robust arms regimes and are supplying to Saudi Arabia. But this from Amnesty International on Saudi Arabia says Saudi Arabia G20 leaders must address dire human rights record as the kingdom takes over the presidency of the G20. Next year will be the G20 summit. Saudi Arabia doing very well. There's a boxing match between Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz on Saturday. Gucci, Chanel, Starbucks, big companies are going there. There's a GCC conference in Riyadh. Why do you think Amnesty International is making a row about Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's not just Amnesty. My group, Code Pink, we have a campaign to boycott Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia should be seen as a pariah state. The G20 should not be meeting in Saudi Arabia, and Western entertainers or entertainers from around the world should not be going to Saudi Arabia.
What's the Code Pink campaign specifically against Saudi then?
Our campaign is the whole deal. We're saying to nice companies like Lush, the cosmetic company that has all these very good programs.
One of the most
things.
progressive companies helping against surveillance.
They have 3 stores in Saudi Arabia. They tell us they don't make any money there. We said, well, then you should close them down. And so we have a boycott. In fact, we went into one of the Lush stores just yesterday.
Here in London.
Here in London, something that we do in the U.S. all the time. And we were sort of live streaming, and I was explaining and going to the manager and saying, please send our requests up the chain of command saying that you shouldn't be having the stores in Saudi. She grabbed the phone out of our hand and called the police on us. So much for free speech in London. Why should the G20 be meeting there when Saudis have thrown women activists in prison and tortured them? Most recently, in the last 2 weeks, have thrown a new set of activists in prison. They're responsible for the humanitarian catastrophe in Yemen. So Saudi Arabia should be a country that's on the boycott list.
Well, we always invite the Saudi Arabian ambassador to London on the show, and I'm sure Lush would love to come on to explain why.
Just don't go in their embassy, because you never know if you'll come out alive.
Of course, the Khashoggi Washington Post journalist. Well, Saudi Arabia is getting close to Israel. Of course, there are BDS boycotts of Israel. Secretary Pompeo, your Secretary of State, said we welcome the statement from Foreign Minister Longarek that Bolivia will work to re-establish diplomatic ties with Israel. As I say, getting closer with Saudi, and the transitional government's desire to engage with the world's democracies as it moves towards free and fair elections. Bolivia, you've been in Bolivia.
I just came from there, and it is heartbreaking.
Britain recognizes the transitional government as a move to free and fair elections.
Well, first of all, let's say it was a coup. When the military tells you you should leave, that is a coup. When a new government takes in that was not that was not elected, in fact, in the elections, the party of the now de facto President Jeanine Áñez got 4% of the vote. And when they come in and supposed to be only for transition to new elections, which, by the way, Evo Morales said, OK, let's do it. But they said, no, you've got to go. They instead are redoing the entire cabinet, redoing entire foreign relations, breaking relations with Venezuela, sending home over 700 Cuban doctors, making relations with right-wing apartheid governments like Israel, like Bolsonaro in Brazil, like Ivan Duque in Colombia. We should recognize in 14 years what Evo Morales did was lift millions of people out of poverty and give power to the indigenous community that has been so repressed for hundreds of years.
Tell me about the reported massacres by the de facto British and American-backed governments, and I understand you were tear-gassed yourself.
Well, tear-gas, but also was there when the massacre occurred right outside of La Paz. There have been 2 massacres, one outside of Cochabamba, one outside of La Paz, all indigenous people who were killed. And in addition to the over 30 people who have been killed, there are hundreds of people who have been wounded. And we have seen with our own eyes and coughing the whole time and tears in our eyes, the way they use tear gas to break up peaceful demonstrations of thousands and thousands of indigenous people. It's not a democracy. And will there be free and fair elections in Bolivia when people are so afraid now, when right-wing racist people have taken over this government? I don't think the conditions can be there for free and fair elections.
Medea Benjamin, thank you.
Thank you.